Darkness has rules. For 3 years of war in the Pacific, those rules remained absolute. Japanese bomber crews understood them intimately. Fly at night. Become untouchable. Invisible. Safe. American engineers sleeping in tents at Mindoro understood them differently. Darkness meant waiting, listening for engine sounds that signaled incoming death, counting seconds until the explosion started. December 1944. The mathematics of nocturnal warfare were elegantly simple and brutally one-sided. Conventional fighters couldn't hunt what their pilots couldn't see. Anti-aircraft batteries fired at engine sounds. Tracers arcing through emptiness, hitting nothing. Japanese bombers exploited this fundamental asymmetry, attacking Allied positions night after night with near impunity. Major Carroll Smith sits motionless in his cockpit at McGuire Field, watching fuel gauges and instrument dials glow phosphorescent green in the darkness. 26 years old, 43 combat missions behind him, 4 confirmed kills. Tonight, 12 Japanese bombers are inbound, and Smith commands the only weapon system in the Southwest Pacific that can challenge darkness itself. The Northrop P-61 Black Widow crouches on the coral runway like something that escaped from a fever dream. 66-foot wingspan, twin-boom configuration that makes conventional pilots uncomfortable just looking at it. 2 Pratt & Whitney R 2,800 engines producing 2,000 horsepower each. But the real power resides in the aircraft's nose, the SCR-720 radar system. According to combat psychology research documented by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman in his groundbreaking work on killing, humans possess innate resistance to killing that must be overcome through specific training mechanisms. Distance provides one such mechanism. The farther you are from your target, the easier killing becomes psychologically. But Smith's mission tonight inverts this calculus entirely. He'll hunt enemy aircraft in total darkness at ranges measured in yards, close enough to see exhaust flames from enemy engines. Yet his targets will never know he exists until the moment his cannons fire. Behind Smith, separated by armored bulkhead, Lieutenant Philip Porter monitors the radar scope in the radar operator's compartment. 6 months of experience reading glowing blips on circular displays. Porter's job requires interpreting ghostly returns that might indicate enemy bombers, or might be weather patterns, or might be friendly aircraft whose IFF transponders malfunctioned. Mistakes mean shooting down your own side, or allowing enemy bombers to slip through to massacre sleeping engineers. The partnership between pilot and radar operator represents something unprecedented in aerial combat warfare conducted by 2 men who cannot see each other, communicating through intercom static, trusting absolutely in skills the other possesses. 1 man flies, 1 man sees. Together they hunt. For 14 consecutive nights, Japanese bombers have attacked Mindoro. 334 air raid alerts. American construction crews building the 2 airfields that will support the Lingayen Gulf invasion have learned to sleep in shallow increments, always listening, always ready to dive into slit trenches when the sirens wail. The psychological toll of sustained nocturnal bombardment creates what military medical personnel term operational exhaustion. Soldiers whose nervous systems remain perpetually activated, whose bodies forget how to distinguish safety from danger. The Japanese understand what those airfields represent strategically. If American fighters can operate from Mindoro, they'll provide air cover for the entire Lingayen invasion force. 20,000 soldiers preparing to storm beaches need those fighters overhead. The Japanese must prevent airfield completion. They send everything: conventional bombers, kamikaze aircraft, any platform capable of carrying explosives south toward Mindoro. Smith's squadron, the 418th Night Fighter Squadron, arrived 3 days ago, on December 26th. They're the only unit standing between incoming bombers and catastrophic ground casualties. The pressure doesn't compress gradually. It arrives fully formed, absolute, suffocating. At 2,340 hours, Porter's voice crackles through the intercom. Contact. bearing 035, range 4 miles, altitude 8,000 feet, moving 180 knots. Smith's hands move across controls with practiced precision. Throttles forward. The R-2800 engines respond with a sound like controlled avalanche. The Black Widow climbs at 2,000 feet per minute, while Porter calls corrections. Heading, altitude, range. Through the canopy, Smith sees nothing. No moon, no stars. Cloud cover obscures everything. This is why Japanese planners chose tonight for their raid. Complete darkness traditionally means complete protection, but the SCR-720 radar doesn't care about darkness. The rotating parabolic dish in the aircraft's nose sends microwave pulses forward at 180 degrees. When those pulses strike an aircraft, they bounce back. Porter's scope displays the return as a glowing blip with azimuth and elevation data. The system effectively grants vision where human eyes fail completely. Range 3 miles. Smith activates his own simplified radar display, integrated into the instrument panel. When the target closes to within a mile, he can track it himself, freeing Porter to scan for additional contacts. The target is a Mitsubishi G4M, the twin-engine medium bomber Americans call Betty. Maximum speed 270 miles per hour. Crew of 7. Bomb load 1,760 pounds. The Betty possesses one critical vulnerability that Smith will exploit. No self-sealing fuel tanks. Japanese aircraft designers sacrificed protection for range, betting that speed and darkness would provide sufficient defense. Tonight that bet fails. Range 2 miles. 1 mile. The blip on Smith's scope grows larger, more defined. At 500 yards, he finally acquires the target visually, a dark shape against marginally less dark clouds, faint orange glow from engine exhausts. Smith positions the P-61 slightly below and behind the bomber. The 4 20mm Hispano cannons are mounted in the belly, fixed forward. He must aim the entire aircraft, using the N6 gun sight to place the bomber's silhouette within the illuminated reticle. 350 yards. The Betty crew flies straight and level, unaware that death tracks them through darkness they believed was sanctuary. Smith's finger tightens on the trigger. The decision he makes in this moment to fire or hold, to kill or let live, has been shaped by 18 months of exhaustive training. Night fighter school at Orlando Army Airfield in Florida. Radar intercept procedures, gunnery practice in total darkness. The military training regimen, documented by Grossman, specifically includes desensitization to killing through repeated simulated combat, transforming the act from moral crisis into conditioned reflex. Smith fires. The 4 cannons discharge simultaneously. The sound pounds through the airframe despite engine noise. 20mm high-explosive shells stream toward the Betty at 2,800 feet per second. 2-second burst. 12 rounds per cannon. 48 shells total. The Betty's right wing explodes. Fuel ignites instantly, the non-self-sealing tanks rupturing. Aviation gasoline transforming into fireball. The bomber rolls right, enters steep dive, becomes falling torch illuminating clouds below. It impacts the sea 8 miles north of Mindoro at 2,357 hours. 1 bomber destroyed. 11 remain inbound. Smith's fuel gauge shows 15% consumed. He has 112 minutes of fuel remaining, and 3 more contacts appearing on Porter's scope. The night has barely begun, and the mathematics of survival are already turning unfavorable. Hunting requires patience measured in heartbeats and fuel consumption. 0014 hours. December 30th. Porter identifies the second contact. Bearing 180, altitude 6,000 feet, range 6 miles. 23 miles from the first kill. The Black Widow cruises at 280 miles per hour, meaning roughly 5 minutes to intercept. 5 minutes the bomber spends flying closer to Mindoro, closer to the airfields, closer to completing its mission. Smith pushes the P-61 faster, 320 miles per hour. The 2,800 engines consume fuel at alarming rates at high power settings. Every minute at maximum speed costs him 3 minutes of patrol time. But mathematical elegance means nothing if the bomber reaches its target zone before Smith intercepts. According to research compiled by military historians analyzing Pacific theater operations, night interception success rates hovered below 5% through most of 1943 and early 1944. The sky presents enormous three-dimensional space where even radar-equipped fighters struggled to locate individual bombers. Finding 4 bombers in one night qualifies as statistically improbable. The 418th Night Fighter Squadron accumulated 18 total kills in 14 months of Pacific combat. 18 kills across an entire squadron. Smith already owns 4 personal kills. Adding 4 more tonight would make him the highest-scoring American night fighter ace of the entire war. But records exist for historians to debate in peacetime comfort. What matters now? Stopping bombers before they kill Americans. Sleeping in tents who trusted Smith to keep darkness safe. Range decreases 4 miles. 3, 2. Smith acquires the second Betty at 1 mile. Same vulnerable fuel tanks. Same fatal design philosophy that traded protection for operational range. The bomber flies at 6,000 feet, lower than the first target, closer to cloud layer, giving Smith less vertical maneuvering room. Night fighter doctrine demands perfect approaches. Too fast means overshooting the target. Too slow risks visual detection by enemy gunners. Surprise provides the single greatest tactical advantage. Once bomber crews know you're hunting them, clean interceptions transform into desperate dogfights, where Japanese defensive gunners can kill you as easily as you can kill them. At 500 yards, Smith sees the Betty clearly dark mass against dark sky. The bomber flies straight and level. No evasive maneuvers. No indication the crew suspects anything. The P-61's matte black paint scheme renders it nearly invisible at night. The engines run quieter than most fighters. Japanese airmen fear the Black Widow, but fear only functions when you know the predator approaches. Smith centers the target in his gun sight. Range 350 yards. He fires. 2-second burst. 48 rounds. The shells tear through the Betty's fuselage. Right engine ignites, then left. Both wings burning within seconds. The bomber noses over, dives toward the ocean. Impact at 0019 hours. 17 minutes after midnight. 2 bombers destroyed. 10 remain. Smith's fuel gauge, 42%. Porter identifies 2 more contacts. 1 at 9,000 feet. 1 at 4,000 feet. 8 miles separating them. Smith faces decision-making under extreme time pressure, a scenario that psychologist Gary Klein documents in his research on naturalistic decision-making among emergency responders and military personnel. Klein's studies reveal that experts don't compare multiple options. They recognize patterns and execute the first workable solution their experience provides. Smith chooses the higher target first. Climbing consumes less fuel than rapid descent, but the higher bomber is also farther north. Pursuing it allows the lower aircraft to approach Mindoro unchallenged. If Smith makes the wrong choice, 1 bomber penetrates American defenses and the entire mission becomes failure. The P-61 reaches 9,000 feet at 0023 hours. Porter locks the 3rd contact. Range 7 miles, heading 160, speed 190 knots. This bomber behaves differently. It's faster than previous Bettys. It's taking evasive action, turning, changing altitude randomly. Someone aboard that aircraft knows American night fighters patrol these skies. The 3rd target is a Nakajima Ki 49 Donryu, designated Helen by Allied intelligence. Faster than the Betty maximum speed, 306 miles per hour. Better defensive armament, including 57.7mm machine guns. The tail gunner commands clear field of fire directly astern. Approaching from dead 6 o'clock puts Smith in the gunner's sights. Smith adjusts his approach, coming from below and left the bomber's blind spot. Most Japanese bombers feature poor ventral coverage. The belly remains vulnerable. Smith exploits this weakness with tactical precision that reflects thousands of training hours. Range decreases to 1 mile. The Helen continues evasive maneuvers, turning left, then right, climbing 200 feet, descending 300. The pilot understands that straight and level flight creates easy targets. Random heading and altitude changes complicate radar tracking. Porter compensates by predicting the bomber's movement patterns, watching for rhythm in the randomness, anticipating the next turn. This represents the pinnacle of radar operator skill, not merely reading the scope, but understanding the psychology of the pilot, creating those blips. Smith closes to 600 yards. The Helen makes sharp right turn. Smith follows. The P-61's twin-boom configuration provides excellent stability. The aircraft responds smoothly to control inputs. Range: 500 yards, 450, 400. At 375 yards, the Helen's tail gunner opens fire. Tracers stream past Smith's canopy. The element of surprise evaporates. Smith has seconds before the bomber pilot initiates aggressive, evasive maneuvers. He squeezes the trigger. 3-second burst. 72 rounds longer than previous attacks, necessary because the target is maneuvering. The 20mm shells punch through the Helen's fuselage. The right engine explodes. The bomber rolls inverted, enters spin, falls burning through 9,000 feet. Impact at 0029 hours, 29 minutes after midnight. 3 bombers destroyed, 9 remain. Smith's fuel gauge: 28%, critical level. Most pilots return to base at 30%. Below that threshold, any delay could result in forced water landing, certain death over open ocean at night, with no visual references, no way to judge altitude until the aircraft hits the surface. Porter identifies one more contact, the 4th target, heading 170, altitude 4,000 feet, range 9 miles. This is the low-altitude bomber Smith bypassed earlier. It's now only 12 miles from Mindoro. Smith can see searchlight beams from American airfields sweeping the sky. Anti-aircraft batteries have crews at their guns, fingers on triggers, waiting. Smith descends toward the 4th bomber. Diving conserves fuel. The Black Widow drops through 8,000 feet, 7,000, 6,000, 5,000. Smith levels at 4,200 feet, slightly above the target. Altitude advantage provides better attack position. He can dive on the bomber from above, use gravity to increase speed, reduce the time the target has to react. Range closes, 4 miles, 3, 2. Visual acquisition, at 1 mile. Another Betty, flying straight toward Mindoro. No evasive action. The pilot either doesn't know American night fighters are hunting or doesn't care. Perhaps he's accepted death as the price of mission completion, a psychological state that author Emiko Onuki-Tierney explores in her research on kamikaze pilots, documenting how Japanese military culture constructed frameworks where self-sacrifice became not just honorable but expected. Smith positions the P-61 for the kill, below and behind, 350 yards. He checks his ammunition counter. 512 rounds remaining. Enough for 3 more attacks. Maybe 4 if conservative. But this is the 4th target. Smith must make every shot count. Fuel gauge, 23%. Below safety margins. If he engages and misses, he won't have fuel to pursue again. 1 chance, 1 burst, then mandatory return to base, regardless of outcome. Smith fires at 0034 hours, 2-second burst, 48 rounds. The 20mm shells converge on the Betty's center fuselage. The port wing separates from the aircraft. Fuel tanks rupture. Fire spreads across remaining wing structure. The bomber rolls left, dives, impact at 0035 hours, 35 minutes after midnight. 4 bombers destroyed in 55 minutes. Smith turns the Black Widow toward Mindoro. Fuel gauge, 21%. Maguire Field lies 18 miles south. The mathematical calculation appears simple. The P-61 consumes approximately 100 gallons per hour at cruise speed. Smith has roughly 60 gallons remaining. At cruise speed, he can fly for another 36 minutes, more than sufficient to reach the airfield. Unless something goes wrong, Porter scans his radar scope. Additional contacts. Negative. The remaining 8 Japanese bombers have turned back. Whether they detected Smith's attacks or lost their nerve remains irrelevant. Mission accomplished. 4 kills. 0 American casualties. Airfields safe. Construction crews will work through the night without interruption. The Lingayen Gulf invasion schedule remains intact, but Smith's night refuses to end. At 0042 hours, Porter detects new contact. Heading north, range 4 miles, altitude 7,000 feet. Smith checks his position. 12 miles from WWII Field, fuel at 19%. The contact sits between Smith and his base. If it's a Japanese bomber, it's heading toward the airfields Smith just defended. Engaging will consume more fuel, possibly too much fuel. Smith might not make it back to base. The alternative presents itself with brutal clarity. Let a Japanese bomber reach Mindoro unchallenged. Smith has destroyed 4 aircraft. If a 5th bomber penetrates defenses and kills American personnel, the entire night's work becomes tainted. Numbers don't matter if someone dies, because Smith prioritized his own survival over mission completion. This decision-making moment exemplifies what ethicist Peter Singer terms the expanding circle of moral consideration. Smith must weigh his own survival against the lives of soldiers he'll never meet, whose names he doesn't know, whose deaths would occur because he chose safety over duty. Smith turns toward the contact. Porter calls vectors. Range closes rapidly. 3 miles. 2, 1. Smith acquires the target visually at 800 yards. It's not a bomber. It's a Nakajima Ki 84 Hayate Allied reporting name Frank. Single-engine fighter. Maximum speed 392 miles per hour. 4 12.7mm machine guns. 2 20mm cannons. One of the best Japanese fighters in service. The Frank is faster than the P-61, more maneuverable, better rate of climb. In daylight, a skilled Frank pilot could outfight a Black Widow. But this isn't daylight, and the Frank pilot has no radar. He's flying blind, searching for American aircraft using visual references that don't exist in complete darkness. Smith possesses singular advantage. The Frank pilot doesn't know Smith is there. Smith positions the P-61 below and behind the fighter. Range 500 yards. The approach duplicates his bomber. Intercepts. Get close. Fire. Confirm kill. But fighters present smaller targets, harder to hit. The Frank has armor protection around cockpit and engine. A 2-second burst might prove insufficient. Smith closes to 300 yards. Fuel gauge, 17%. If he misses this shot, he won't have time for second attempt. He'll have to disengage immediately and hope he has enough fuel to reach WWII Field. Missing also means the Frank will know American night fighters patrol these skies. Element of surprise will be lost. Future intercepts will become exponentially more difficult. Smith centers the Frank in his gun sight. His finger rests on the trigger. The mathematics are clear. Engaging the fighter will drop his fuel to 15% below minimum safety margin, but letting it go means risking American lives on the ground. The P-61's engines hum steadily at 320 miles per hour. The Frank flies straight and level, unaware it's being hunted. Smith makes his decision at 0045 hours. He squeezes the trigger. 3-second burst. 72 rounds, the longest burst of the night. The shells tear through the Frank's tail section and engine cowling. The engine bursts into flames. Black smoke pours from the cowling. The fighter rolls right, dives. Smith watches it descend through 7,000 feet, 6,000, 5,000. The flames grow larger. At 3,000 feet, the pilot ejects. Smith sees the parachute open white canopy against black sky. The Frank continues its dive. Impacts water at 0046 hours. Smith checks his fuel gauge. 15%. The engagement consumed more fuel than calculated. Maguire Field lies 11 miles south. The P-61's fuel consumption at cruise speed means Smith has approximately 22 minutes of flight time remaining, enough to reach the airfield with minimal reserves. But any headwind or navigation error will exhaust his fuel before landing. Porter guides Smith toward Mindoro, using radar navigation. The island appears on the scope as large landmass. Maguire Field occupies the southwestern coast. The airfield has been operational only 4 days. Minimal lighting. No instrument landing system. Pilots landing at night rely on a single row of kerosene lamps marking the runway. From 5 miles out, those lamps look like dim yellow dots, easy to miss in darkness. Smith descends to 2,000 feet. Fuel gauge, 13%. The P-61's fuel tanks hold 646 gallons total. 13% equals 84 gallons. At cruise power settings, that provides 18 minutes of flight time. Smith is 8 miles from the airfield. At 280 miles per hour, that's approximately 1.7 minutes to reach landing pattern. Enough fuel? Barely. At 0052 hours, Smith spots the runway lights. 12 dim lamps arranged in a line. The runway is 5,000 feet long, crushed coral surface. Engineers completed construction December 26th, the same day the 418th Night Fighter Squadron arrived. The runway is adequate for P-61 operations, but lacks safety features of established airfields. No overrun area, no crash barriers. If Smith lands too fast or too slow, the aircraft will leave the runway. At night, with minimal lighting, any landing error will likely prove fatal. Smith enters the landing pattern at 1,000 feet. Fuel gauge, 11%, 57 gallons. The P-61 consumes fuel faster during landing approach as power settings fluctuate. Engines spool up during turns, spool down during descents. Each power change consumes additional fuel. Smith calculates he has approximately 12 minutes of fuel remaining, more than enough to land, unless something goes wrong. At 0055 hours, something goes wrong. The runway lights extinguish, all 12 lamps simultaneously. Complete darkness. Smith is 3 miles from the runway. Altitude 800 feet. Airspeed 140 knots. Without runway lights, he has no visual reference for landing. The P-61 will hit the ground before Smith realizes how low he's flying. This represents what aviation safety researchers term controlled flight into terrain. The aircraft functions normally, but pilots lose spatial orientation and inadvertently crash. It's one of the leading causes of aviation fatalities, particularly in military operations conducted under instrument meteorological conditions. Porter suggests using the radar altimeter. The device measures height above ground by bouncing radio waves off the surface, accurate to within 50 feet. Smith could descend slowly, using the altimeter and dead reckoning navigation. When the altimeter shows 0 feet, he'll be on the ground. The technique is extraordinarily dangerous. Any navigation error means landing off the runway, hitting trees or coral reefs or construction equipment. Smith's fuel gauge shows 9%, 46 gallons, 8 minutes of flight time. Not enough to divert to another airfield. Tacloban on Leyte is the nearest alternative, 90 miles northeast. The P-61 would run out of fuel 40 miles short. Smith has one option: land at Maguire Field without runway lights, or crash into the ocean and hope someone rescues him before he drowns. The decision is simple. Smith has survived 4 intercepts, 5 kills in 55 minutes. He's saved American lives on the ground, protected the airfields, enabled the Lingayen Gulf invasion to proceed on schedule. Dying now because of extinguished runway lights would render the entire mission meaningless. Smith turns the P-61 toward where he believes the runway is located. His altitude, 600 feet. Fuel, 9%. And the darkness below is absolute. The radar altimeter, becomes Smith's only connection to reality. He descends to 400 feet. The instrument shows 380 feet above ground level. He reduces airspeed to 120 knots. The P-61's stall speed, with flaps fully extended, is 95 knots. Flying at 120 knots provides a 25-knot safety margin. Not much, but descending slower would consume more fuel. The mathematics remain unforgiving. Porter monitors the radar scope. The coastline of Mindoro shows clearly. Maguire Field sits inland, approximately 1 mile from the beach. Smith uses compass heading to navigate. The runway runs north-south. Smith approaches from the north. His heading is 180 degrees. If his navigation is accurate, the runway will be directly ahead. If not, he'll land in jungle or construction areas or coral reefs. Psychologist Atul Gawande documents in his research on surgical decision-making that expertise under pressure requires what he terms mindful practice, not mere repetition, but deliberate attention to process even when stress threatens to overwhelm cognitive function. Smith's 18 months of night fighter training must now compress into the next 3 minutes. At 0058 hours, Smith extends landing gear. 3 green indicator lights confirm all 3 wheels are down and locked. Main gear under each engine nacelle. Nose gear forward fuselage. The P-61's landing gear is robust, designed to handle rough airfields. But landing without visual references means Smith cannot judge his touchdown point. He might hit too hard, collapse the gear. The aircraft would cartwheel. At 120 knots, the crew would not survive. Fuel gauge, 7%, 36 gallons, 5 minutes remaining. Smith extends flaps to full. The P-61's airspeed decreases to 110 knots. The aircraft descends at 300 feet per minute. Radar altimeter, 250 feet. 200, 150. Smith cannot see the ground. No lights, no visual references, just instruments and the hope that his navigation is correct. At 100 feet altitude, Smith reduces power. The descent rate increases to 400 feet per minute, faster than normal, but necessary to reach the ground before fuel exhaustion. 75 feet, 50, 25. Smith prepares for touchdown. His hands grip the control column. His feet rest on rudder pedals, ready to correct for any deviation. The P-61's main wheels contact crushed coral at 0059 hours. The impact is harder than normal. Smith feels the jolt through the airframe, but the landing gear holds. The nose wheel touches down 3 seconds later. Smith applies brakes. The P-61 decelerates rapidly. 100 knots, 80, 60, 40. The aircraft slows to taxi speed at 20 knots. Smith cannot see where he is on the runway. He keeps the brakes applied until the P-61 stops completely. Fuel gauge, 6%, 29 gallons, 3 minutes of fuel remaining. Ground crew arrives with flashlights. They guide Smith to the parking area. The P-61's engines shut down at 0103 hours. 1 hour and 3 minutes after takeoff. Smith climbs out of the cockpit. His legs are stiff, his hands are shaking. Not from fear, from exhaustion. 5 intercepts, 5 kills, 1 blind landing, all in 63 minutes of combat. Porter climbs out from the radar operator's compartment. He tracked 5 targets successfully, vectored Smith to each intercept, maintained radar contact throughout the engagement. Without Porter's skill, none of the kills would have been possible. Night fighting is a team effort. Pilot and radar operator working in perfect coordination. The ground crew inspects the P-61. No damage. All 4 cannons functioned correctly. Total ammunition expended, 408 rounds. Smith started with 800 rounds. He landed with 392 rounds remaining. Enough ammunition for 2 more intercepts, but 0 fuel for pursuing additional targets. Intelligence officers arrive at 0115 hours. They want details, times, locations, altitudes, Aircraft types. Smith provides the information from memory. 4 Mitsubishi G-4M Betty bombers. 1 Nakajima Ki 49 Helen bomber. 1 Nakajima Ki 84 Frank fighter. All destroyed between 2,357 hours on December 29th and 0046 hours on December 30th. Total engagement time, 49 minutes. The intelligence officers confirmed the kills through multiple sources. Ground radar tracked the intercepts. Coast watchers reported seeing aircraft crash into the ocean. Wreckage is visible at first light. 4 bombers, 1 fighter. All exactly where Smith reported. 5 kills in one night equals the record for American night fighters. But Smith isn't finished. December 30th, 1,944. At 1,430 hours, Smith flies his second mission of the day. Japanese reconnaissance aircraft have been spotted over Mindoro. Single-engine fighters, faster than bombers, more difficult to intercept. Smith and Porter take off in the same P-61. The aircraft has been refueled and rearmed. 800 rounds of 20mm ammunition, 646 gallons of fuel. At 1,512 hours, Porter detects a contact heading north. Altitude 12,000 feet, range 8 miles. Smith climbs to intercept. The target is another Nakajima Ki 84 Frank fighter, faster than the P-61 inches level flight, but Smith has altitude advantage. He dives on the Frank from above. The diving attack increases his speed to 390 miles per hour, faster than the Frank's maximum level speed. Smith fires at 400 yards. 2-second burst, 48 rounds. The Frank's engine explodes. The fighter rolls inverted, dives into the ocean. Smith's 7th kill. The final victory makes him the top-scoring American night fighter ace of World War II. 7 confirmed kills, all achieved in less than 24 hours of combat flying. No other American night fighter pilot in any theater would match that total. The 418th Night Fighter Squadron continues operations from Mindoro through January 1945. The unit scores 18 total kills during the war, the highest total of any P-61 squadron in the Pacific Theater. Smith's 7 kills account for 39% of the squadron's total score. Porter receives the Distinguished Flying Cross for his role as radar operator. His skill made every intercept possible. The P-61 Times Awastin continues flying combat missions through May 1945. The aircraft survives the war, undamaged. After VJ Day, it is scrapped, along with most Black Widows. Only 4 P-61 seconds exist today. None of them is Smith's aircraft. The nose art, the kill markings, the aircraft that hunted 4 bombers in 80 minutes, all lost to history. McGuire Field supports the Lingayen Gulf invasion as planned. American forces land on January 9th, 1945. P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts, operating from Mindoro, provide air cover. The airfield Smith defended on December 29th enabled that air cover. Engineers estimate the Japanese bombs hitting the construction areas would have delayed airfield completion by 2 weeks. 2 weeks meant the invasion would have been delayed. Casualties would have mounted. The war would have lasted longer. Smith survives the war. He returns to the United States in February 1946, leaves the military, becomes a civilian, never seeks publicity, never writes memoirs. The only records of his achievement exist in military archives, unit histories, intelligence reports. The dry documentation of kills confirmed and missions accomplished. The P-61 Black Widow proved what night fighters could achieve. 700 aircraft built, used in every theater: European, Pacific, China, Burma, India, Mediterranean. The aircraft dominated night combat from 1944 through 1945. After the war, the P-61 is redesignated F-61, continues service until 1954, then retires, replaced by jet-powered night fighters with better performance. But in December 1944, over Mindoro, the Black Widow was the most advanced night fighter in the world, and Carroll Smith was the best pilot flying it. The technological legacy extends beyond the P-61 itself. The SCR-720 radar system and the doctrine of aggressive night interception developed during the Pacific Campaign would evolve into modern airborne intercept radar used in F-14 Tomcats, F-15 Eagles, F-22 Raptors. The two-person crew configuration pilot and weapons systems officer working in coordinated partnership becomes standard in fighters like the F-4 Phantom and F-14 Tomcat. According to military aviation historians, the night fighter tactics pioneered by pilots like Smith fundamentally altered how air forces conceptualize 24-hour operations. Darkness ceased being sanctuary and became merely another operational environment that technology could penetrate. Yet Smith himself disappears from popular memory. No films dramatize his missions. No best-selling books chronicle his achievements. The name Carroll Smith means nothing to most Americans, including many military aviation enthusiasts. This pattern of forgotten excellence appears repeatedly throughout military history. The soldiers who change wars through skill and courage often vanish from collective memory, replaced by more photogenic heroes, more dramatic narratives, simpler stories. Smith's story is not simple. It's about radar technology and fuel calculations. It's about two men in separate compartments, communicating through static. It's about mathematical decision-making under existential pressure. It's about flying at night when you cannot see, killing enemies you'll never meet face to face, landing without lights because the mission demands you survive to fight again tomorrow. The story lacks cinematic symmetry. Smith doesn't die heroically. He doesn't deliver memorable speeches. He simply does his job with extraordinary competence, then goes home when the war ends and lives the rest of his life in obscurity. Perhaps that's the most important lesson. Heroism doesn't always look like Hollywood imagines. Sometimes it looks like a 26-year-old pilot staring at glowing instruments in total darkness, making calculations about fuel and ammunition, and whether he can intercept one more bomber before the laws of physics force him to choose between mission and survival. Sometimes it looks like choosing the mission 5 times. In one night, while 12 Japanese bombers tried to kill 20,000 Americans, sleeping in tents who never knew Carroll Smith existed. The runway lights at McGuire Field were repaired before dawn on December 30th. A generator failure caused the blackout mechanical problem, not enemy action. Smith never filed a complaint, never requested commendation for landing without visual references. The blind landing doesn't appear in his official record. It was simply one more problem he solved, because the alternative was unacceptable. That night, December 29th into 30th, 1944, changed American night fighter doctrine across every theater. It proved that aggressive radar intercept tactics could achieve kill ratios that seemed statistically impossible. It demonstrated that darkness was no longer sanctuary. And it happened because one pilot and one radar operator flew a strange-looking twin-boom aircraft into the black Pacific night and hunted enemy bombers with invisible radio waves while their fuel gauges dropped toward zero. Their ammunition counters ticked downward, and their survival depended on mathematics they calculated in their heads, while tracers streamed past their canopy. Carroll Smith died in 1984, age 66. He is buried in a cemetery in Pennsylvania. His gravestone does not mention the 7 kills. It does not mention the night he changed aerial warfare. It simply records his name, his dates, his service, as if that were enough. Perhaps it is. The men Smith saved that night, the engineers, the construction crews, the soldiers preparing for Lingayen Gulf, never knew his name. They woke on December 30th and continued building airfields, unaware that 4 Japanese bombers had been hunting them, unaware that those bombers burned in the ocean because a man they'd never meet decided that their lives were worth more than his fuel margin. That's how most heroism actually works, not with witnesses and medals and parades, but with quiet decisions made in darkness, with consequences that ripple through history in ways no one tracks or measures or remembers. Somewhere over the Bismarck Sea, debris from Carroll Smith's victory still rests on the ocean floor. Aluminum and steel, corroded by 7 decades of saltwater, transformed into reef structure. Fish swim through cockpits where Japanese airmen died. Coral grows on engines that once carried bombs toward American positions. The ocean consumes everything eventually. Metal, memory, the names of men who changed history with glowing radar scopes and shrinking fuel gauges. But the change remains. Every time a modern fighter aircraft detects an enemy beyond visual range, every time a weapons systems officer guides a pilot toward an intercept, every time military planners assume that air forces can operate with equal lethality in darkness as in daylight, Carroll Smith's mission on December 29, 1944, echoes forward. He proved that impossible was simply another problem requiring solution. That darkness could be penetrated. That 2 men working in perfect coordination could hunt and kill and survive when mathematics suggested they should fail. He proved it 5 times in one night, then landed blind because the alternative was crashing, then flew again the next afternoon because reconnaissance aircraft were threatening Mindoro, then went home when the war ended and never told anyone his story, because the story was never about him. It was about the engineers sleeping in tents who lived to see dawn on December 30th. It was about the soldiers who landed at Lingayen Gulf under air cover made possible by the airfields those engineers built. It was about technology transforming warfare, and 2 men using that technology to kill enemies in ways that seemed impossible until they did it. Carroll Smith knew this. That's why he never sought recognition. The work was the work. The mission was the mission. Whether anyone remembered didn't change what happened in the darkness over Mindoro. 4 bombers destroyed, 1 fighter destroyed. 5 kills in 55 minutes. 7 kills total in 1 day. And 20,000 Americans who woke on December 30th, 1944. Never knowing they'd survived the night because a pilot they'd never meet decided their lives were worth more than his fuel reserves. That's the real legacy. Not the kills, not the records, not the technology. The lives saved by competence and courage exercised in darkness where no one watches and no one remembers, and the only reward is knowing you did what the moment demanded. Carroll Smith understood that. And that understanding is why his name belongs alongside the most important pilots in aviation history, even though most people will never hear it.